I'm Mark Hennick. This is So-Called Normal. Hey folks, welcome to So-Called Normal. I'm Mark Hennick. Today on the show we have Jimmy Rankin. Lord, Thunder and Jesus, boy, we got Jimmy Rankin coming on the show. He's my very first Cape Bretoner, which I was super excited for, and we talked all about Cape Breton. You know, if you don't know who Jimmy Rankin is, then either you've never been to the East Coast anytime in the last probably 30 years, or you have a lot of work to do on Apple Music after you go to Apple Podcasts and subscribe to the show, of course. So we talked about his new album, Moving East. Jimmy's launching into a new tour now. That's why he was in Toronto to come into studio with me. Kicking off a new tour, Songs from Route 19 on Cape Breton Island. And it's also the Celtic Colours Festival this week on my home island of Cape Breton. So, you know, what better time to have a Celtic roots icon like Jimmy Rankin, who, even beyond the Rankin family, went on to have a long and very, very successful solo career. So I had so much fun chatting with him, and I hope you have fun listening to me talk to Jimmy Rankin here on So-Called Normal. So yeah, you're the first Cape Bretoner we have on the show. So, how you doing, bud?
Well, now that accent's from your side of the island. I'm from the other side of the island, the west coast.
Oh,
and we
that's
talk
right.
a bit like that. We get excited. We talk about. We go high like the Irish.
Oh, okay. Yeah, we go more blunted, I think. Yeah, that's the Newfoundland influence that comes in through North Sydney.
Yeah, exactly. I was just going to say that. No, I'm good. Good. I'm just about to embark on my Canadian tour. It's called Songs from Route 19. And speaking of the other side of the island of Cape Breton, Route 19 is the road, strip of road that runs down. Once you get on the island, hang a hard left and keep going until it ends. And that's Route 19. So the tour is called Songs from Route 19. And I'll be doing a lot of songs from my Moving East CD, which is my latest CD. Yeah. This is my second run across Canada for that record, by the way.
Wow. Yeah. The demand has been, and the reception has probably been pretty great.
Been really great. You know, I've been... this year, I think it's this fall, I can't remember, it's been so long, but this is the 30th anniversary of the first record I did with my siblings. Was it Fare Thee Well Love? The first one was called The Rankin Family. Maybe it was Fare Thee Well Love. I can't remember. It's 30 years since we made
30 years.
Yeah, 30 years. So I guess it's 1989, right?
And that's been, the Rankin family, of course, and yourself pretty much provides the soundtrack for Cape Breton. That's how many people know.
Well, a good part of it, yeah.
So how would you describe? Let's start here. How would you describe Cape Breton Island to somebody who might be listening who's never been there, or maybe even never heard of it?
Well, people from Toronto keep moving there, and they discover it, and then they say, "Oh, don't tell anybody the secret of Cape Breton, about the secret," because Cape Breton's beautiful. Yeah. It's rugged and rolling. It's rural, a lot of it. It's surrounded by sea. It's got a lot. It's got fishing, farming, forestry, beaches. I sound like a commercial here, but it's really
tourism. Cape Breton's going to be an
It's a beautiful place. And the summers are beautiful. Part of it's on the Northumberland Strait, part of it's on the Atlantic Ocean, so the water's a bit warmer on the Northumberland. You can jump in the water in the summertime and swim for a good part of it.
Can't do that in the Atlantic Ocean, that's for sure.
Well, you can, but you'll freeze your arse off.
I remember.
But what else? It's just beautiful. It's old. Yeah. It's not overly developed.
Right. It's a slower pace of life.
It's a slower pace, and people are slowly discovering it. People have been discovering it for a long time. A lot of golfers are discovering it now because of the links courses in Inverness, just down the road from me, about 11 miles where I'm from. I'm from Mabu, by the way. Yeah. So people are coming there in their private planes now, and people have always been there, but it's. I find now, since the golf courses and just the change in time, people are always looking for undiscovered destinations.
Is it changing the community?
It is changing. Yeah. Inverness has changed a lot. It's been reinvigorated. You know, it's an old mining town and poor economy. As you know, we Cape Bretoners have been educated there forever, and we've been leaving to find work in other places for generations. So it's nice to see some people are starting to move back a little, but it's a big economic migration, as Lyndon McIntyre called it some years back. I love it there. It's beautiful. That's where my my family's from, my roots, my ancestors came over on the ship Hector from Scotland. A lot of them did, and they settled in that Inverness County area. So all my roots are there, all my childhood is there.
Yeah.
And, so I have a place still in Cape Breton,
So
in the Mobile area.
Is that your, I mean, I think everybody from Cape Breton still knows Cape Breton as home. But is that still home for you, or do you live?
I live in Halifax. I was in Nashville for about 7.5 years.
I saw that.
And speaking of the shirt here, does that say Nashville?
Mercury Nashville, yeah.
That's not intentional, but I just threw it on this morning. But I was there for 7.5 years, moved back about 2 years ago.
Yeah.
And my wife and family and I, we always lived in Halifax. I went to school there, art college, NASCAD in Halifax. But we moved back about 2 years ago. We bought a house. We just finished renovating it. And but I've always maintained a place in Cape Breton, where I'm from. I have a nice, beautiful place, old farm on the ocean. Yeah. And it's a beautiful country. And it's rural and quiet and peaceful. You can see the stars and it's quiet. You know, if you're from,
I know,
you're an East Coaster.
You can't do that in Toronto. You don't see the stars very
well,
often.
maybe Northern Ontario you
Right,
can, but
right.
not here
Not
too
here.
often.
So, I mean, it seems like a bit of a misnomer to ask you how your cultural roots had influenced your music. I mean, in many ways, I think it went the other way around. Your music influenced the culture of Cape Breton. I mean, you are part of the fabric there. But did you notice a change when you went to Nashville for so long? Did it change your music, your approach, or were you pretty well grounded by then?
No, I take in influences. I'm influenced by whatever I see when it comes out in some form. But I'm a pretty hardcore me. And but I'd been going to Nashville since the mid-'90s. I started making records there with my siblings. We made a few records there. And then I was going back and forth to write, and I made a couple of solo records there. Yeah. Not country records. There's every kind of music in Nashville. That's the great thing about Nashville. And
your own career has been so diverse as well.
Yeah, if you look at my history of album making, it's pretty kind of all over the map, but at the core of it is me, singer-songwriter.
Right.
But no, it didn't change me. I went there, I wanted to write with people. I thought maybe I'd start writing for other people and, maybe get off the road, do a publishing deal and all of that. And if anywhere it's going to happen, it's going to be there because it's a music mecca and people are coming there from all over the world. It's super competitive, but you have incredible talent there from everywhere. But I realized there, I wrote with people, I can do that, I can co-write, I can, spit out a melody as good as the next guy and a turn a phrase. But I realized there after a while, I got really busy. I started making records and started touring Canada like crazy. And I realized that I don't want to do that. I don't want to be stuck in a small room writing songs, fictitious love songs for for the pop charts. And, God bless people that do that. They do that every day, twice a day, and they're great at it.
Pays the bills, yeah.
Well, it pays the bills, but people love to do it. It's, it's a thing. And people can make a lot of money at doing it, and they're great at it. But me, I realized that I like making records, and I like touring, and I like performing for people. I was brought up as an entertainer.
So what is it? Yeah, what is it about the road, about Route 19, that is so attractive for you?
I don't know. There's as you know, the people ask me this all the time when I do interviews across the country. And what is it about Atlantic Canada? It's such a musical place. And
Cape Breton in particular. I read once that Cape Breton has more fiddlers per capita than anywhere else in the world.
Well, Cape Breton is a fiddle culture.
Yeah.
And my ancestors came over from the Highlands of Scotland, a lot of them, and they brought with them their music, their fiddling, their language, their traditions. And the language took an awful beating. It's barely surviving, but it's making a bit of a comeback. But the fiddle survived, the fiddle and the dancing, and the storytelling survived. It's just part of the tradition there. And Cape Breton fiddle music has morphed into its own thing. And I'm not a Cape Breton fiddler. I realized a long time ago I had a brother who's a master fiddler and piano player, and I just figured I'd never be anything near that. He was just a natural, so I took up art. In any event, John Morris, yes.
Yeah.
In any event, this fiddling survived there, and it's evolved into its own entity, its own genre of music, and it's known worldwide. And there's composers there of traditional Cape Breton fiddle music, and there have been great composers there that wrote. Denard MacDonald, who was my neighbor in Mabu, was the uncle of John Allen Cameron. He wrote thousands. He was a genius composer. He wrote thousands and thousands of standard classic Cape Breton fiddle tunes that are played all over the world. So it's just there. It's part of it. And they thought it was dying in 1970 because there weren't a lot of young players. And a guy by the name of Ron McGuinness made a film called The Vanishing Cape Breton Fiddler, in which you'll see Dan R. MacDonald. It features Dan R. He's the central character or the central guy in the film. And my brother as a kid, he was maybe 8 or 10 or something.
Oh, wow.
And maybe a bit older. I can't remember, 1970. But he posed the question, that is this fiddle music dying? And he wanted to inspire people to bring it back. But it's thriving today. It's thriving. I don't know half the fiddlers around there. There seems like everybody's playing fiddle and music and dancing. And
well, you have, of course, Ashley McIsaac.
Well,
and,
Ashley's a veteran now. Ashley's in his mid-40s, and he was a kid. I remember Ashley when he was just a kid, and Ashley certainly, and Natalie McMaster
she's
really
achieved worldwide.
Brought that music to the masses and in different forms. Ashley put rock and roll to it, and punk, and so they're known worldwide for their music, and I think inspired, along with bands like the Bear McNeils, as you know, and the Rankins, and tons of other people, inspired like a whole other generation, and now it's thriving, which is really amazing to see. And people come from all over the planet to hear it.
Sure, certainly. The Celtic Colours Festival and many others. Tell me more about the Rankin family. I mean, it's such an institution in Cape Breton, but for those who don't know, what were the roots of that? How did that happen?
Well, as I was saying, we grew up in the community of Mabu, and next door to us was a dance hall. That whole county each community has a little dance hall, and that's where people have their weddings and their parties and their post-funeral gatherings and everything. It's a dance hall, so that's where we grew up. Our next door neighbor was Dan R. MacDonald. Across the road was Donald Angus Beaton, who was a great old-time fiddler. Who would have been the same era as Muddy Waters, similar era, whatever was in the stars at that time, all these great players. And they were very singular players. So we had all kinds of fiddle music around. My parents had people come in the house for parties and things, and we would entertain them. But I'm from a family of 12, so I had older siblings. And that was, for some reason, I don't know who started us singing, but I've always heard music around my house. We were always singing, naturally singing.
I just want to highlight for a second, you just glazed over the fact that you're from a family of 12. My mother was one of 16. My father was one of 15. I didn't realize until after I left Cape Breton that that's not normal.
No. It's an old Catholic family. Maybe.
This is it, Irish Catholic,
And, my neighbors that was a family of 6, and I thought that was a small family.
I know.
And, I have 2 kids now, and I think, I don't know how, I can't even imagine having 6 kids. But I think times were different,
Sure.
We certainly didn't. We walked to hockey practice, and we wore secondhand gear, and you didn't get a bicycle every birthday, that kind of thing.
Yeah. So where were you in the line of 12?
I was 5th youngest.
Okay.
So in any event, where did the Rankin family come from? Somewhere along the line, a band was formed of my older siblings, starting from the top, and there was 5 of them in the band or something, and they would entertain people at parties and gatherings and at the hall next door for dances. They called them pig and whistles in those days, and it was basically they were licensed dances. And they would play. My sister Raylene sang. Genevieve, they played various instruments, piano. John Morris played fiddle for the Celtic sets, and then they played they call round dance music, which was anything that would make people dance.
Right.
So the band started there, and then eventually older siblings went off to college. And I was out riding a bicycle one day, and my brother said, "You want to play drums tonight at the wedding?" And this is true. And I never played drums before. There was a drum kit, an old drum kit sitting around the living room. I think they had something in mind. And I don't know why they picked me. Literally in front of a jam-packed, smoky old dance hall, my brother showed me how to play drums. So I started playing drums for the Rankins, and I did that right up until we started making records. And a couple of years into that, I would play drums and then run up and sing a song.
Yeah.
And eventually we were able to hire a drummer, and went on to be just a front guy singing with my sisters, and that's sort of it in a nutshell. But we made a record in 1989, and I guess this is the 30th anniversary of it this year. It was independently made. We made another one within the year called Fare Thee Well, Love. Right. But those records, we went out with a car. My sister Raylene and I went out in a snowstorm. We had them on cassette tape and just went around to gas stations and started hawking them. And eventually, I don't know, we got them to radio stations. CBC picked it up, played it across the country. Radio stations, like college radio stations, went crazy over it, and the CBC played it like crazy. And then festivals started calling our house because we didn't have an agent or anything.
Right.
And what we did, if you ever see an original cassette, it's got my mother's telephone number on it and her address in Mabo. So I remember being at my mom's place, and there was an old phone on the wall. It was like back in the day when people had one phone and it was connected
Rotary,
to the wall.
Was it?
It was one, the one you spin. And I answered the phone. It was the Winnipeg Folk Festival, wondering if this was the Rankin family's house, and because there are all kinds of Rankins in that.
Sure.
So they just went through the directory and found the. So anyway, so it was like that. It was very organic, and it snowballed, and we set up an office in Halifax and started selling cassettes like crazy. Because Sam the Record Man was across the street from our office on Barrington Street. So I would go over, whoever was around, with a borrowed pickup truck and pick up like one of those pallets full of cassette tapes, like thousands, and then whacking them over to Sam's. And of course, the record companies took notice of this.
Right, sure.
And you're selling music, so there's money to be made. So
was it easier to get noticed at that time, do you think?
No, it wasn't.
No.
There was no infrastructure in the East Coast for that. People like Rita McNeil and Anne Murray, those people had gone to Toronto and everything,
Oh, interesting.
And if you had to go to Toronto, there weren't really any. There were studios and stuff, but there were no lawyers or accountants that understood the music business. Everything was here, and we had no idea. There was no roadmap for us, We were all sort of out of college, just at a crossroads. Anyway, EMI took notice. Polygram did, Bob Ansell, and then Dean Cameron at EMI, and then several other. There was like a bidding war for the Rankins, and companies started coming to the East Coast Music Awards, and
of which you've won all of them.
A lot of them, with the Rankins and the solo. But in any event, we signed with EMI, and they took those two recordings we did independently, and the second one they released some singles to radio, and the second single they released was called Fare Thee Well, Love, and that went to number one on adult contemporary radio in Canada for 3 weeks. And it was the first Canadian single to do that in many years. There was something happening with Canadian music at that time. There was a wave or something, but we happened to be in the right place. But we had something very unique and different and good. Things, we went from playing little 400 seaters to arenas and Massey halls, multiple nights, and then touring around the world and all.
There's a lot of work, of course, and a long family history that went into this, but to achieve that kind of success in a relatively short period of time, what was that like for a couple of kids coming out of Mabo to...
it was kind of crazy because we were extremely busy, and I remember we made those two records, and, we had to find management and had to learn how to deal with all that and deal with record companies. We had never, we weren't business people. We were musicians, and my sister was a lawyer, and we had graduated from college. I was an artist, and there was no business background with us, so we were trying to deal with all that stuff. And then, extremely, we all had relationships with, spouses, some of us were married, and it was kind of a crazy time, because I remember making our third record, which was the first record under EMI, in Toronto with Chad, where we made the first two at Inception Sound out in Downsview, and getting these reports that the record sales were like crazy. Oh, you just sold, 150,000 copies or 200,000, and the single was going like to number one. It was top 10, and then the video is this, and then next you have a number one single. So it was kind of surreal, but we were really busy working, and then when you weren't in the studio, you were busy touring over in Europe or wherever you were touring and doing something with music business. So you kind of really didn't have the chance to absorb it and enjoy it as much.
Sure.
You know, I knew what was going on when you're in it because you're extremely busy.
Right.
You know, and you're trying to ride the wave, and nobody knew it was a wave. That the waves always come down. You know?
Yeah. Well, so and then in late 1999, the Rankin family announced that they weren't going to be performing together anymore.
That's right. Yeah, we disbanded.
Yeah. So what was happening then? Was that a mutual decision? Was there it just not working? Were you not feeling it anymore?
You know what? We set out. I remember when we set out, and there were 5 of us in the group, and we had a plan that we would continue. We'd do this we'd try it for 5 years and see what we had some goals. You know, okay, we'll get a record deal, whatever that was at the time, and then we wanted to tour Scotland or England or whatever, and. So we accomplished all those things and got increasingly difficult because the industry was changing. We were changing as people. We were growing up. We'd grown up playing music together. It was really hard to make decisions together, you know, at the end of it. And some of us wanted to do this and then I wanted to do that. And, you know, it was just growing pains. And I don't think we ever resolved it, you know. And we had accomplished what we set out to do far beyond. We sold, you know, 1.5 million clothes. I don't know, million something, 0.6 records. I don't remember. But and multi-platinum records and all that and gold records. And we really accomplished a lot. It was far beyond what we set out to do. And I think we just ran out of gas, you know. And it was like, I wanted to keep going, but... other family members didn't. You know, they had everybody was tired, and people had lives. They had kids, and it was really hard to be. You know, we still got along, but it was not. You know, it's hard to be in a band for one thing, and then be in a band with your siblings. You know, and because everything's personal. Right. You know, it's ultra personal.
It's hard to say it's just business, as it so often is.
It's
in the
hard to
music
separate
industry,
business from personal, especially, you know. And the music industry had changed.
Right.
And, I saw it changing. People were saying it was changing. The record companies, some of the people in that company and in the business saw it and they got out.
Right.
And it's become what it is today, you know, record sales. I went out in 2001 touring my first solo record. I've been doing that ever since. I never stopped. I worked harder and harder and harder, and I saw record sales just plummeting, you know, like just going, no matter how hard you worked, it was just like, it just, and that's what the internet did. It killed it, you know.
So in between, though, you going out in a big way as a solo artist and the Rankin family disbanding, your brother John Morris died very suddenly. Yeah,
that was very awful. It was tragic. In 2000, I was in Toronto at the time. I was getting ready to go on stage for Farm Aid, and I got the call and come up to your hotel room. There's an emergency call, so. That was that, and it was a tragic thing. So that was 2000. So,
I mean, the significance of that, I'm sure for you as a family, but for Cape Breton Island, that was news everywhere.
I think it really hit people right across the country because the Rankin family really resonated with a lot of people from coast to coast in this country, and it was very Canadian, and it was probably pretty different from what was going on in the 90s. It was a different music. It wasn't. It was very organic. It was very, very Canadian.
Yes.
You know, and it was accessible for a whole different demographics. You know, from kids to people our age now and older, and it really resonated with people. So that was all over the news, and that was a pretty incredible time, though. The people that reached out at that time, across the country, it really struck a chord with people. So,
how did that affect your family? You're all.
It was
over
devastating
the place
because that was a sibling. We'd lost siblings before, or a pair. Like both my parents were gone by that time, but never a sibling. And John Morris was 40 at that time. He was still young, so it was tragic too. And John Morris had a wife with 2 young kids. And the positive thing that came out of that is that. His kids are thriving. You know, his son, Michael, is working great. He's getting along really well out in Calgary. And Molly is in a band called Always, ALVVAYS. So they're touring around the world. They're doing great, So that's
fantastic.
People, you just keep on going and good things.
What else are you going to do? Right?
You don't have any choice, and they did, and we all did. But it was awful at the time. It was pretty tragic to lose a sibling that you've worked with in such a close way. And John Morris was a great musician.
Yeah.
He had perfect pitch. He could play any instrument. He was sort of the nerve center behind the band, like anything that was out of tune, or he was that kind of guy. Yeah, that's what 20 years ago. Yeah, it's a long time ago. In any event, we did do a reunion tour. A couple after that. Yeah. And we got together, I can't remember when it was, maybe 10 years ago or something like that.
Right, yeah.
And we went out across the country to that kind of, people came out in droves. And, and we ended the show off at the Metro Center in Halifax, and it was just crazy. So,
I don't think I've ever been to a wedding and even a couple of funerals in Cape Breton that haven't played the Mull River Shuffle.
Yeah. Well, I go out. I do a lot of touring just with a guitar player now, or a guitar and bass, upright bass. Even at those shows, I hear, Mull River Shuffle, and the people are always asking for Rankin songs, because I think that people still remember that because they were the kids that their parents played the Rankin Family for. So it's kind of, the music is living on. But I go out in the Maritimes and I'll play Sydney or Pictou or the Shore Club in Halifax, or the Rebecca Cohn in Halifax, or festivals in PEI or wherever in New Brunswick. And I'll bring a band, a fiddler, and now a bagpipe player, and like a whole band. And I always close the show with Mull River Shuffle, and people just go nuts. It's like a cult song there.
It really is.
And I think the version that people relate to is a version that the Rankins did at the Queen Elizabeth Theatre in Vancouver.
Yes, of course, the recording.
So it's a live recording that was for a documentary. So there's film of that, by the way. Right. And I'm really grateful that it was captured on film, because that song, if you hear the original recording, it's pretty straight ahead,
Yeah.
So,
but that one, the energy is...
the energy, it became a real crowd pleaser very quickly, but it also was a jam thing for the band, and it featured everybody, vocals and the fiddle and piano, and it morphed into this thing every night. It went on for a long time. So the version you hear, the live version, it's maybe 8 or 9 minutes long. It originally was like 16 or 17 minutes long.
Wow. Now,
I remember having to edit that, and I didn't want to cut it. I was, we're not cutting this. And now it's like, okay, you guys are right. That was a bit long.
So was that an original? Did you guys write that?
I wrote that.
You wrote it. Okay.
I wrote it. I wrote the lyrics, and I had the idea for the thing. And then John Morris was a Celtic master, and his piano playing and his fiddle. So it was arranged by the Rankins, and then it evolved into this sort of art piece.
Sure.
Over
where did the monologue at the beginning, the story, come from? Where in your mind?
Actually, I started doing that with the Rankins. I think the first time we did it was maybe, I don't know if I did it well with the monologue, but I think it may have been John Morris said, now you need a little monologue to introduce this. So,
because I almost feel like that really amplifies.
I think, and on the way to the gig, my wife and I wrote that.
Yeah.
On the way to the first time we performed it or something, and it was somewhere in Nova Scotia.
Yeah.
And it was before it was recorded, because we used to do some of those songs live.
Yeah.
So, but where it comes from, Mull River is where my mom grew up. And I used to go there. That was my summer vacation, 7 miles away. We didn't go to Florida. We didn't go to California. We went to Mull River.
You walked down the Mull River.
We didn't walk, but I have walked it, and I've biked it. But that's where my grandmother lived and her siblings, and it's a beautiful old farm. It was just history. I used to sit around the kitchen. They had kerosene lamps before electricity, and they were the kind of people, they were from another old world that people can't even relate to now. And I thought everybody's grandparents were like this, but they refused to accept change. So they had a radio and the newspaper and kerosene lanterns and all that, and they would sit around and talk about things 50 years ago that happened, or 50 or 75 years ago, and all of that, and it was history. And I grew up absorbing that, and we'd walk over to see their neighbors on a neighboring farm and have tea and toast or cheese or whatever. And it was discourse and change of stories and history and all that. And it's something you don't see a hell of a lot today with these computers that everybody's carrying around. And we're all guilty of it now. But it was conversation and history and learning about the past. So that's where that song came. It's a composite of people I knew growing up, crazy Cape Bretoners and all
Right.
that, and
Oh,
old timers and young timers and all that.
And that's such a central part, I think, of Cape Breton culture is this storytelling, this oral history.
Well, I was saying before about what my ancestors brought over from Scotland was their storytelling and their music and their traditions.
Yeah. So now your solo career was arguably bigger, or as big or bigger than your career as a family.
Definitely
as well.
longer.
Well, definitely longer. Although you still get asked about the Rankins all the time.
Yeah, which is all right. I have no problem with
sure.
that. I'm very grateful to have the Rankin background. To me, it's both one and the same. You know,
Yeah.
I just continued on from the Rankins, and when people ask me about the Rankins, I'm like, yeah, sure. Yeah. And if I can sing those songs, a lot of them I don't. You know, but a lot of them I do. There are standards that I sing every night from Rankins. So.
Crowd pleasers, I imagine.
But the Rankin thing went on from 1989 or 1990 to 1999. So it was basically 10 years of touring and making records. And then I made a record after that in 2000 and went out and started touring it right after 9/11. What a great time to go out.
Wow.
I was out on the road after 9/11 and I had all this marketing money because I went independent. EMI was just distributing for me. So I had all this radio stuff set up and nobody was listening to radio. They were all listening to news radio and people weren't going out. Right. People weren't going out to concerts. They weren't going out to restaurants. People were afraid. People were in shock. And I remember here in Toronto playing it's a CNE, what's that? It's like a business.
The exhibition?
No, it's a business, first Canadian place.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, and they have a courtyard. You can do it was like a rent gig. It was afternoon lunch hour and I did like 45 minutes. And it was shortly after 9/11 that record, and I was out with that tour. And people were in shock everywhere across the country, across North America, the world, really. And we were set up in First Canadian Place down at the bottom, you know. And if you ever go in there, it's like all office, like balconies, offices.
And that's one of the tallest buildings in Toronto, too.
People came out for the lunch hour, and people were so quiet. But they were on the balconies all right up to the top, and they were listening. And I think people were happy to come out and hear music and, you know, but people were really afraid, especially people in office buildings, you know, who knew.
Yeah. How is your storytelling, your approach to performance, has it evolved? How has it evolved, I guess, over the years? I mean, to move from that little tiny hall next door, come in and play the drums approach to playing arenas and playing massive crowds. Well, how has that influenced you?
How has that, from my background, influenced what I do today?
Well, yeah, I mean, or how has it changed over the years? How have you noticed?
I've definitely changed. I'm 30 years into it.
Right.
And I have to say, when I started out with the Rankins, you know, I grew up playing drums, and then I started, in my teens, started playing guitar and singing, and then in my 20s, maybe in my late teens, started writing songs. But I don't know if I would have hired me.
Why not? Why is that?
Well, I was learning then,
right.
And I didn't have any. My kids have been playing Suzuki, fiddle and cello since they could walk and stuff, and so and they can read music, sight read. I've never had a music lesson in my life. I've never had a vocal lesson. So I'm self-taught. I've taught myself how to play guitar, piano, sing. You know, I've been around music all my life, and it's osmosis. But there was nobody saying, "Oh, here's how to do it. Here's how you sing." You know, so. I've improved a lot as I've had to.
Technically,
I'm a better performer. I'm a better singer. I wish I was a better guitar player. I'm okay. I'm a good rhythm player. Yeah, I'm just a lot better. You know, as a writer, I don't know if you get older. I think you make better choices or different choices as a writer.
Had you ever, I mean, we touched on this a little bit, how wild of a time it was, especially in those early few days, but did the pressures of being a traveling, touring musician ever get to you? You know, lots of people succumb to depression and alcoholism and all drugs, all kinds of stuff.
All of the above.
All of the above. Okay.
Oh, it's hard. I'm about to go out for 5 weeks. It's like a marathon.
Yeah.
And I'm alone. Like I've toured in all capacities and tour buses, vans, airplanes, blah, blah, blah.
It's not that glamorous of a life.
Well, actually, I love entertaining.
Right.
Like I love performing. Like that's the part I really enjoy. It's the travel and trying to eat properly. All the things, you know, the day-to-day mundane things, but getting from A to B and trying to get enough rest and trying not to get sick, you know. And but performing that's the fun part, and then there's all the others dealing with all the business part of everything.
Right.
But, and the thing is, it's a very lonely life. People think, the people are out there partying all the time, and I've done my share of that, you know, and I've been known to, you know, but it's really at the end of it, if you can't do that
Right.
day to day, it's a job. You have to, and you have to be on, you know, and those who continue to, you know, you wouldn't make it.
Right, and there's an expectation of the audience too. That
of course,
you want to
people are
for
paying hard cash to see you. They don't see somebody fall off the stage, you know.
Right.
I want to be as best as I can for people, because people are paying really good money. They're coming out to see me, and I want to give them their money's worth. It's also for me too. I have high standards for what I do. And you know, knock on wood, you know, I'm just about to embark on this thing. I never know. It's a marathon. You start out. It's like, okay, how am I going to make it to the finish line? 5 weeks flat out, you know, doing 28 or 30 dates, like, and traveling, like not just 20. If you were doing 28 shows at one venue, like that'd be like a cakewalk, you know.
Yeah, compared to
just,
coast
you know,
to coast.
Really, you'd just be like going to work, but you're traveling and all that. And anyway. But,
so how do you take care of yourself then? What do you do to stay, you know, because you want to be as present as possible, I would imagine, at every performance. You don't want people to see you as just phoning it in, just another day on the job.
I never phone it in.
Right?
I don't know. You just try to stay healthy.
Yeah.
Maybe get out and walk a bit. I should exercise. I'm getting older now. I'm guilty of, but a lot of people exercise and, you know, meditate, and I haven't found that yet. But I'm in pretty good shape.
You look great.
Yeah, thank you.
You're still alive for a touring musician. That's a good.
I'm still alive. Thank you for noticing.
So you mentioned your reunions with the Rankin family a couple of times, that you've had a few of them, and your sister Raylene passed away a few years ago.
Raylene passed away, God, is it 5 years now or something? Yeah.
Cancer.
She had breast cancer,
Yeah. Now you had reunited though before
we
that.
did. Yeah, we did. I can't remember if we did 1 or 2 tours with Raylene on board, but we had this last tour, and there was an acoustic tour that we went across the country with. And she got sick and she couldn't make it, and she was really upset. Like she that was just not something that she wanted to do. But that was it.
She had an extraordinary voice.
Yeah, she, you know, her signature song was "Rise Again," and Raylene was sort of the traditionalist in the group. She could sing anything, as far as I'm concerned. I was listening to her do a jazz song the other day, but on a record. But she loved traditional music, so. Yeah.
You still listen to family members' music too?
I don't go back and listen to that music. I don't even, you know, if I have to go out and sing that stuff, and I have to listen to it and see how I remember it.
Right.
But it's not like, I think a lot of musicians are the same. You don't go back and, I was so great.
Yeah.
Awesome. Listen to me. Listen
to how great I am. Yeah.
Yeah, but sometimes I do bring up a track if I'm reminiscing or I want to.
Sure.
I was, you know, because I remember when all those things are recorded. They're sort of like a diary.
What's your most personal work? What do you think is your most personal work?
Well, my first record was called Song Dog. And those are songs that I was sort of putting together when I was working with the Rankins. And that was sort of, it launched me back into the music industry as a solo artist, back when there still was a music industry. There were a lot of personal songs on there, I think. They all come from me. And at some point or another, it all comes out of me, whether I'm writing for somebody else or writing about somebody else, because I'm pretty good at putting myself in someone else's shoes and, you know, thinking, as a writer should, you know. Yeah.
So what actually, that's a good question then, or a good point rather. What is your creative process? What does that look like when you're sitting down to write a song? What do you draw it from?
Well, I always keep little memos on my phone, and I have a little moleskin journal. You know, it's not a journal. It's just like jot down ideas, song titles, and lines. And if I come across something interesting in a book or something, or a magazine, I'll jot it down. And I just kind of constantly thinking, constantly thinking about it. Sometimes you don't write for a long time. Some people are writing every day, and I used to be that way. But I'm constantly thinking about it, and ideas at least, and melodies. Like melodies are pretty easy to me, you know. Lyrics are more of a puzzle for me, but melody is, that's I can spew out a melody pretty quickly.
How many songs would you say you've written?
I don't know.
I've
never counted. It's a lot.
So you've never felt like you're running out? Like there's still new stuff coming?
No, you have to, as an artist, you have to change.
Sure.
And keep it. So when I moved back to Nova Scotia 2 years ago, I started making these records which were sort of country inspired. They were sort of singer-songwriter country. And I don't like twangy pop, generic country. And these are, I thought, really good country records, especially the last one was very straight ahead. It was pop country. And I think all really good songs. And then when I moved home, I was thinking, well, I was coming back to my roots, back to Nova Scotia, back to Canada, and I really was glad to be home back in Canada. And I really missed, as you get older, you sort of, I don't know what your experience is, but for me, I love going home to where I'm from and seeing the people that I know, that I grew up with, and whoever's left there, and that's your roots, that's your stomping ground. So
I remember very distinctly not being able to possibly wait getting out of there when I was young.
We all did,
Right.
It was the same because there's not a lot there. You're trained to leave.
Right. But as I get older, it's almost this yearning.
It's a yearning. It's a magnet because you want to go back. And we're lucky to have that because a lot of people don't have that, a place where they can go back to when they're older and people still remember them and they have a connection, Right. I don't want to die in some hotel room or some apartment in Toronto or Scarborough or
Nashville.
That's
cliche.
No. Well, seriously. But I can go home where people know me, and then let them bury me or scatter my ashes. But
I'm not sure if that's a good thing or bad. I want to go home so they can bury me.
I don't know. What the hell was the question? I digress.
I don't even know.
It was something about coming home.
Yeah. Well, so this is it. So you've been coming home, I guess. And
so that my album, I wanted to get back to that. And I was thinking about the music that inspired me, the things that inspired me growing up. So I went back into old songs I'd written for the Rankins back in those days that they never recorded. There's only so many songs you could put on a record. Right. And stories and about people that I knew growing up and things like that and roots instruments, like acoustic instruments. And I was thinking about that when I wanted to make this record. I really had a burning desire to make this record. And I had a lot of ideas and I was really looking for somebody that I could work with, like a producer in that part of the world, because I'd never made a record in Nova Scotia.
Really?
And not a full length. No, I recorded there a little bit.
Yeah.
But I wanted to find somebody who had good pop sensibilities, but also understood songwriting and traditional, like folk music and that. Yeah. And I was racking my brain. There were a lot of really great people there, but I just wasn't thinking couldn't pinpoint the right person for this project. And then I was, ironically, pulling out of my lane in Cape Breton one beautiful fall afternoon, and the CBC radio was on, and on comes a Joel Plaskett song, and I was like, bingo, light bulb went off, and I was like, he's got a studio in Dartmouth, it's perfect. And I hear good things about the studio, and I know Joel a little bit, not that well at the time. So I called him up immediately and I said, I want to make a record. Are you interested? Do you have any time? And he was like, sure. And he looked at his schedule. And so I wasn't sure if he'd get it because I had these songs about, the Raleigh salesman, the Raleigh product salesman called the Raleigh Man. It was about this salesman who used to sell old Raleigh products, drive around in a truck around Cape Breton. And things like that were sort of very kind of old world and very rural and folky, and so. But he got everything. He got the songs like that. He understood, or was more. He was enthusiastic about them more so than other songs. I was like, oh wow, okay, we're on the right. This is going to be good. So, so we started making this record, and he was at the time we were renting when we moved back to Halifax. We were staying across the water in Halifax, and he has a studio in Dartmouth, literally across the bridge. So it was beautiful. I'd get up in the morning, drive the kids to school, and then go to cross the bridge and work with Joel in the studio till 5 or 6, or maybe sometimes earlier, maybe later. For, I don't know, the record went very quickly, and it was fun, and we got all these who we get on this tune? Well, let's bring in Ashley McIsaac. I wanted to have Ashley play some old traditional Cape Breton fiddle music, lo-fi style. And let's get J.P. Cormier. Let's get whoever, and there's a piper just up the street. And it was like that. And people were so enthusiastic, and it was all these brilliant East Coast musicians on that record. And it's just organic. A lot of it's live off the floor in a room, just, with mics set up and take one, okay, it's done. Let's do another one just to have in the bank. Yeah. And there was a lot of that. And it was just a lot of fun making it. It was one of the most, I've made a lot of records. They're all fun. But that one was, it was like easy making. It was just very organic. And it turned into this East Coast folk rock record.
Right. So who do you make your music for now? Who do you write?
I decided that when I returned from Nashville that I'm going to make records for me.
Right.
And I'm, with my audience in mind, but I want to make records. I'm not going to start cater to radio or anything anymore.
Right.
To hell with that. I'm done with that. It's
well, especially since the music industry has changed so
It's
much.
changed, and, the end of it, I started out being played on college radio and CBC, and then pop radio, and then country radio, but there's this thing in Canada about radio where they only have, so much space for Canadian artists. It's always been the same. It's like, Jesus Christ, get over it. We're as good as anybody in the world. You don't have to play everybody else before you play us. We have fantastic music in this country. Why do we have to rely on CanCon? Yeah. So that's the way it is with country radio. It's like they play 3 or 4 Canadian artists, and it's like try 5 for that position. And at the end of it, I had put out this great country record. I thought it was great. I made it with Bill Bell from Toronto here, and a terrific country pop record. He's a talented producer. And he was going around to radio. They'd play me out west. Programmers picked me up. My own backyard in Nova Scotia. I had a fight with the programmer out of Halifax. He's based in Berwick. Saying, why can't you play this record? Well, you had your turn. What the hell's that supposed to mean?
Yeah.
I had my turn. Well, there were other people, younger audience. Well, yeah, they're all young artists. Well, why can't you play both of us? And to hell with Tim McGraw for this month.
Yeah, really. Yeah, one of the biggest names in Canadian music. I think creating new content is exciting.
Well, but it's just hard to find a slot. It's more competitive, and it's like. I try to tell them, listen, who cares if those guys come in to visit your radio station? They want to play Summerside PEI now because everybody's out there playing. They want our money.
Yeah.
In fact, they're taking our money because there's more competition out there now because nobody's selling records. They're not making money. Used to be you could sell records and stay home for a while.
Right.
But now you have to tour.
Yeah.
And they want to play in Red Deer and they want to play in Summerside, these guys. Yeah. And they want to go to your radio station to talk to you. So you don't have to kiss their ass.
Yeah. Now, has that been a rebalancing? I mean, with it all started, I think, with Napster and LimeWire and lifting music, and now has evolved into the Apple Music. You have a whole catalog of the Rankin family and Jimmy Rankin and streaming.
Yeah, streaming doesn't pay anything.
Exactly. So has that shifted though people toward live performances, or has it rebalanced, or is it just now?
I think people always want to hear live music.
Right.
The thing is that people only have so much money to spend.
Sure.
So when they have to pay $300 to see somebody at the Rogers Center here in Toronto?
Yeah.
Or, it's just an expensive night out.
Sure.
$600 and then babysitter, blah, 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 and all that. You don't have money for the little Canadian guy who's playing it down the street. There's only people only have so much disposable income.
Right. And you don't just pick up a record and put it on in your living room with a drink anymore. It's just...
Yeah. But the live music, people will always want to hear live music, I think. You can't beat it. I don't care about virtual reality, whatever the future is. But I've noticed in Halifax when I was going to college there was live music every night of the week at the different venues. You could go out and hear cover bands or original music. And it's really somewhere along the lines just, bands could go across the country, rock bands, and make money at places like these cabarets and things. And now that's just whatever happened to the music industry. I don't know, recorded music, DJs or whatever, but I think maybe that's kind of slowly coming back. Maybe college students would support it, but maybe they want to hear college music or live music more. Yeah. I don't know. I'm not out there in the street anymore.
Well, I mean, you're about to be, in a sense. You're about to kick off.
That's not the street. That's the road.
That's the road. That's very different. Yeah, but you're about to kick off a mini city tour from coast to coast. When the dust dust settles on that, I'm sure you'll have a recovery period. But then what? Do you have more albums in the future?
Yeah, I'll probably put out another record next year. I don't know what. Maybe I'll finish this tour. I have a bit of time off in November, then I'll go out and do some Christmas dates. I did make a Christmas CD, which I didn't want to do for many years, and then I made a Christmas record.
Why didn't you want to do it?
My sisters made one back in the 1990s, and they asked me if I'd be on it. And I don't know, there was something about Christmas music, and I don't know, maybe it was I was afraid that I couldn't write. Man, those Christmas classics are great.
Sure.
I've always tried to sing my own songs, so I did make a Christmas record, and I enlisted the help of some co-writer friends, and we wrote some 3 or 4 Christmas songs. So then that was some classics. So it's a beautiful record. It's called Tinseltown, and that's one record that I will take out for friends and family to play it unabashedly.
Every Christmas.
No, I actually don't. But I don't mind I usually get embarrassed if people are playing my music in the background. But
oh,
if
really?
they play that one, I'm okay with it.
Yeah,
At Christmas. I have so many songs going back 30 years. I might put out like a retrospect or something like that. I hate to say greatest hits, but something like that. I think, the question is, I was asking Miles Goodwin from April Wine. Remember April Wine? He's a Nova Scotian. And he was making a blues record last year or something. I think he may have won a Juno for it. I can't remember, or he was nominated. But why are we making records now? Because people aren't buying records. No one has an attention span for records. CDs are obsolete. It's like, do you listen to full-length CDs anymore?
Most recent one I did was John Baptiste.
Okay.
He has a new jazz album out that's really incredible.
Yeah, well, I think that'll correct me if I'm wrong, but I have kids and they don't really listen to albums.
No, generally no, and that was an exception for me, I think, in many ways.
Yeah. So I think people have very short attention span when it comes to music. Why do we make records? Well, we make records so we have something to plug, so we can go out on the road. We make records because we need to. We write songs, and it's fun making records.
Right. So then, how can you keep the culture that brought you to the world and the Rankins to the world? How is that going to continue if people aren't surrounded by music in the same way anymore?
The culture of
the culture of creating music. You said you weren't trained to be a musician. It was just always around you, right? You had the music hall next door. Your family members. Your siblings.
I think in Cape Breton, that's just in the East Coast. Whatever's in the water there in the culture.
That's still there, you think?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I get asked that question. Music, whatever genre it is, there's all kinds of musicians. People just love music there. They love to play it live, and they love to listen to music in their houses and for their gatherings or their weddings or whatever. People love music. As far as continuing music.
What would you tell a new musician just getting in? I mean, you were very young, of course, when you got in, but somebody who's new to this, you're kind of a veteran of you are a veteran of the field now. You've done and seen it all. What would you tell a new musician trying to break in?
Well, it's not easy. You have to really love it. Because if you don't, you won't survive. There are rare exceptions where people don't have to work hard. You have to work really hard. It's the music business. You have to love it, and it just has to be part of you. When I was a kid, I just knew. I hit a certain age. I'd been around music, but when I went to art school, I bought a guitar with my student bursary, and I just knew then I wanted to play in a band, and I knew that I had something. It was drive. And I think all people who get in the music business and stay in it, they have that inner thing, whatever it is. It's art or whatever people choose to do.
But you learn the skills along the way.
But you have to have that, and it's a lot of hard work, and it can break your heart and it can kill you, this job. It really is. People think it's easy, but it's not. Here I am 30 years later talking to you in a room, and this is the fun part, talking about yourself. It's therapy. No, but
I try not to do too much therapy with people.
No, it's fun. It's fun talking about it, reminiscing and stuff. But it's really, at the end of the day, it's hard work. And starting out now, it's changed. I was out doing some dates with a young artist out of Toronto this past spring, and he's telling me how difficult it is, to break into it, because it used to be you get it. Well, if you could get a record deal, you stood a good chance of getting on the radio and being exposed to a large number of people at one time with a single. Now you have to rely on Spotify and these streaming services to get on a playlist, and they don't pay any money. You know, so okay, you get your name out there, but that's. You can die of exposure.
Yes.
Business. So
Yeah.
Pay us.
And
we need to be paid.
The number of times I've been asked to come to an event in exchange for exposure, saying, well, no, thank you. I do a great job of exposing myself.
Yeah, well, exactly.
That's okay.
True enough. You get tired of hearing that after a while. It's like, oh, yeah, this such and such will be there, and blah, blah, blah. It's like,
well, tell me this then. 30 years later, has it all been worth it so far?
Yeah, of course. I'm lucky.
Yeah.
I've made my luck. I'm grateful. I'm still here, and I still love what I do. It's not easy. I don't think it's any easier than it was in a lot of ways. As we're talking about, the business has changed a lot. But I have an audience out there. People come out and see my shows. I have to stay in touch with them, or they'll forget about me.
Right.
But that's part of it. You have to do social media and all those things, which I'm not from that generation, so it's a learning thing for me.
But it sounds like you still love it.
I still love music. I was born an artist. That's all I can say. And I went to art school. I thought I'd be a visual artist. I'm a visual thinker, and I ended up, I was around music all my life, and I ended up playing music and making a living doing it. And I'm still here, and I still love it. I do. It's like I said, it's not easy, but I still love it.
Well, I'm grateful that you still love it, and I don't think it's a stretch to speak on behalf of all Cape Bretoners to be grateful to what you've contributed to our identity in many respects.
Well, thank you very much. That's I know that there are a lot of us out there that contributed to it, but if I had some small part in it, I'm thankful that somebody's thankful.
Jimmy Rankin, thanks so much.
Thanks.
And that's my conversation with Jimmy Rankin. Go pick up his album, Moving East. And if you get a chance to catch him live, it's really there's nothing like it. He talked a lot about how he still loves it and how it's his passion. But Celtic music, roots, traditional music, Cape Breton music, I challenge you, even if you just go onto YouTube or somewhere else right now, you look up that video that Jimmy mentioned for Mull River Shuffle in Vancouver or any other version of it, and I dare you to try and not tap your foot. That's how you know if you have Cape Breton genetics, I think, is when you tap your foot when you hear Jimmy Rankin and the Rankin Family, or anything like it. So check out some of his dates. The Songs from Route 19 tour and the Moving East album is out now. While you got your phone out, if you're listening to this on your phone or wherever else, head over to Apple Music, subscribe to the show. Scroll down to the bottom, leave us a star rating, leave us some of your thoughts in the comments section down there, and look through some of our other episodes. We've done plenty so far. We've got lots more coming every single Monday. And when you subscribe, that's how you get that notification. You'll also be able to find out when new episodes are coming and who's going to be on them if you follow me on social media, at Mark Hennick, that's at MarkHenick, on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, YouTube, everywhere else. So I'm not hard to find. Google it or look me up on any social platform, and you'll get to learn more about the show. You can also look on my website, too, markhennick.com. That's MarkHenick.com. I'd like to thank everybody at E1, Kimberly and Adrian, and everybody else who makes this show possible. My wonderful editor, Dave. I'm not very good at a lot of things, so they make up for a lot of deficiencies in me. So I'm very grateful to them for that, for bringing you this show every single week. So I will talk to you next Monday on So-Called Normal. I'm Mark Hennick.